Hi, this question is looking at the EDUQAS GCSE English Language Paper 2 Question 2. This is the question that's looking at the writer's use of language. So there we go, question 2. And the question is, how does the writer of the newspaper article try to show that Ben Fogle's expedition to the South Pole was full of danger and difficulty? You should comment on what he says and his use of language, tone and structure. And it's 10 marks. This is the Ben Fogle and Captain Scott exam paper. So if you haven't got a copy of it, just go onto Google, type in EDUQAS Ben Fogle, and you should be able to find it pretty easily. So this question, here's a little structure. Question 2, how many marks? Well, it's worth 10 marks. How many points or quotes should you make? I think you should be making 6 to 8 points with quotes. This question should take you about 15 minutes, maybe 13 to 14, 15, but 6 or 8 points. It's really important that you get coverage, you track through the text and use as many quotes as you can explaining why it shows the expedition was tough. What are the marks given for? Well, clear points are related to the quote, quotes to support points, terminology for how the writer presents impression. What do you need to avoid? Waffling. Okay, so we don't want to waffle. We don't want 7 or 8 lines in a PE. Just a couple of sentences, pick a quote, explain why that makes the expedition seem tough, and explain how the writer has done that. So like I said, it's 10 marks, it's 13 to 15 minutes. How many points do you need to use? 5 to 7. If you can go higher than that, then brilliant. So you need to use a range of quotes from the beginning, middle and end of the extract. So we don't just want, from an extract, we don't just want loads of quotes from the start. We want it all the way through, beginning, middle and end, to show the journey that the writer has taken on in the extract. So in the how question, you need to analyse the writer's use of language. What does analyse mean? It means to examine something carefully and in detail, then explain and interpret it. So in this question, we're going to comment on the effect of words and how they make the reader feel. So the writer has picked these words for a reason. It's not random. So why has the writer chosen this and what effect do they want the reader to have? So we're looking at where a writer deliberately, so on purpose, uses word to achieve a special effect. So for example, let's look at a really easy example. So one sentence you might find is, he awoke to a blizzard. So this is the kind of image we might get from a blizzard. So a little bit of a storm, but nothing too heavy. But let's change that sentence now to, he awoke to a raging, howling blizzard. So then we would say that, why has the writer chosen raging? Why has the writer used howling? What's the point of the writer using these adjectives? Well, the impression we get of raging is something like this: someone angry, something intimidating, someone violent. So that turns the blizzard from being something like that into a blizzard that maybe is something like that. A bit more of a storm. So it paints an image in the reader's mind that this storm is aggressive, it's angry, it's violent. So if we put that into a little sentence, the use of the adjectives raging and howling make the storm seem angry and punishing. So when we're looking at the questions, when we're looking at terminology, we're looking at these things: adjectives, verbs, word choice, adverbs, deforest, hyperbole, the structure, punctuation, sensory language and figurative language. It's really important that we use this stuff and get it correct, but we don't want to use it every point. We're not going to force anything. We're not going to whack the examiner over the head. But if you did 7 or 8 points, maybe if you used these terminology 3 or 4 times, that's really good. It's probably better to just use the word If you don't know this terminology, just say the word raging, the word violent. That would be much better than saying the adverb violent and getting it wrong. But really, you should be revising these terms so by the time June comes in that exam, you're ready to use them. So like I just said, terminology is not needed on every point, so you can chill out a little bit with it, but 3 or 4 times during your answer, try and use it. And you don't always have to use the highest ones. You don't have to use simile or metaphor. Verbs and adjectives and adverbs are going to get you a real long way. So here's the question again: how does the writer of a newspaper article show that Ben Fogle's expedition to the South Pole was full of danger? You should comment on what he says, his use of language, tone and structure. So we're looking at this question in a minute. How does it seem difficult? How does it seem tiring? How does it seem dangerous? So we're going to look for language when we read the extract that makes the trip seem dangerous and difficult. And then we're going to zoom in on one word or two word phrases and examine them and analyse them in detail. So there's the extract there. So I'm not going to read through it, so you can pause through the extract. This is the 21st century article about these three guys going on an adventure in the Antarctic. So pause the video or read the paper that you've got, and then we can look at it. So here's just the first column on the left, and we're going to look for language that makes the trip seem dangerous and difficult. Okay, so we're going to pick out a few things here. So first of all, the actual first sentence is, it was the moment when Ben Fogle thought he was going to die. So I've zoomed in on that sentence and I've picked out the phrase going to die. Well, why does it make it seem dangerous and difficult? Well, it's a dramatic opening sentence for a start. So the technique is the dramatic opening sentence, and it makes us think straight away the stakes are really high, that Ben Fogle's life is at risk. So let's pick something else out. This was a huge crack in the ice. So there wasn't just a crack in the ice, it's not a tiny little thing. The adjective huge emphasises the danger. One more. And then at the bottom he says the hardest thing. So the use of the superlative, it shows there's been nothing tougher in Ben Fogle's life. All the trips he's been on, there's been nothing tougher than this trip. So that shows that this trip must be really difficult. So what I'd like you to do now, if it was my lesson, or you can just do it on your own, is your turn. So in that column, just in the left-hand column, not the whole extract, I want you to look for 5 or more words or phrases that make it seem dangerous and difficult. So just from this column on the left, highlight 5 words or phrases that make the expedition seem dangerous and difficult. So like we've already done, you go through it, pick out things that you think the writer has used on purpose, deliberately, to make the expedition seem dangerous and difficult. Pause the video now and have a go. So these are my annotations. So we've talked about the dramatic opening sentence. So it's not just called an expedition, it's an adjective. Grueling makes it sound tough and hard. There isn't just a crevasse, it's a giant crevasse. So again, that emphasises the danger by saying, what connotations do we have with giant? Something is enormous. Then he doesn't just say he was anxious. Ben Fogle was terrified, shows he's very scared. Then we're given a statistic. They're not just going over 20 miles, they're going across 481 miles of snow in 18 days. So a huge feat, a huge feat of endurance these guys have to do. Then it says it takes a toll on our body. So maybe this is sort of implying that it's just all the days they've been out, that bit by bit, the word toll, bit by bit, it's making damage to their body. Okay, then we talked about the hardest thing, we've talked about that one, and then we almost get a list of things that have gone wrong with Ben Fogle's body. He started off with frostbite, burnt lips, got blisters on his feet, hypothermia. So all those things that the writer has purposely listed, these things to make it sound, all these ailments that add up sound really bad. And then just the last sentence, it says he doesn't think he was going to finish the race. It was so bad he thought he couldn't continue. So we're going to analyse these words and phrases in a bit more detail and explain their effect. So terrified, so we've talked about that one. So he wasn't just scared, he was terrified, which means he was really, really petrified. He almost couldn't go on. It was almost something that made him frozen with fear. So first of all, what is connotations? Well, connotations are images or ideas associated with a word or phrase. So if we look at the terrified one that we just talked about, words or images I would associate with terrified would be frozen, scared, alarm, horror, fright, panic. So what I've done is the small ones like frozen, those are the words that I think link a little bit, and then the big links I've put in bigger writing. So the writer has used these words to tell the reader that Ben Fogle was frozen, he was scared, he was alarmed, there was horror, panic, fright. All these images or ideas are automatically put into the reader's head through just that choice of that verb. Again, burnt. So pause the video. What connotations could we have with burnt? He didn't just, his lips weren't just sore, they were burnt. So sore, sun, scorched, horror, pain, heat. So there you go. So the word burnt I have with me is on this expedition he's in pain, his body is in pain, which makes it very difficult. So then what I want you to do now is pause the video and have a go at doing this on your own. Use the word grueling or hostile, you choose, and see what words you can link to that. Okay, so giant, what connotations does that have? And why has the writer chosen to use it? Because that's basically what the question is. What connotations do the words in the quotes have? But why has the writer chosen to use it? The writer wants the text to seem difficult and dangerous, so he's chosen words deliberately to do that. So let's look at the words he's chosen and why he's used them. So giant. So that is an image that I would link to giant. A big, intimidating, violent, dangerous, enormous. So if this crevasse, this crack was like this, then this crack is dangerous. It's enormous. So this crack is ready to split at any moment. So how are we going to structure our answer? So there you go. Ben Fogle's expedition was full of danger and difficulty. So we've got to make 5 to 8 points using quotes. So number 1, you can write this down if you want. Use the sentence starter the writer uses. Number 2, use an adjective and technique. So we're going to say what technique the writer does it, and then maybe use an adjective just to describe it. So for example, the writer uses the powerful adjective. The writer uses the peaceful simile. The writer uses the violent verb. So the adjective is in the blue and the actual technique the writer does is in yellow. If you don't do the blue, it's not the end of the world, but we really do want to get that technique in there. But I'm going to use the writer chooses the powerful adjective. And it's giant. So the writer, so then number 3, use my quote. So the writer uses the powerful adjective giant. And then number 4, to show what? Well, the writer uses the powerful adjective giant to show how dangerous the expedition was. So that's almost answering my question. And then number 5, what is the connotation of the chosen word? Why has the writer decided to choose giant as opposed to big or whatever? Yeah, but so giant suggests, we're going back to our connotations, we're going back to this, yeah? So what does giant suggest? Well, to me, giant suggests the crevasse was intimidating, enormous, and emphasises the danger Fogle experienced. So I'm saying that the use of the word giant as opposed to big makes it sound really intimidating, and we can almost imagine ourselves being there and hating and panicking like Ben Fogle would panic. So there you go. So here's it all together. The writer uses the powerful adjective giant to show how dangerous the expedition was. Giant suggests the crevasse was intimidating, enormous, and emphasised the danger Fogle experienced. So really mature, really great point to make. So even though this seems quite long, it's only 2 sentences, and we probably don't need to use all of it every single time, but using terminology will get you far, and there it all is together. So there, my black is my sort of point, my red is my quote, and my blue is my explanation, and there it all is together. So here's a sheet, and it's available on the college website through Moodle. So it's point, technique, quote, connotation of quote. So what I want you to do now is try and write 3 different answers for that first column. And if you need help on quotes, here's some quotes I would say to do. Going to die, grueling expedition, drying crevasse, we've done drying crevasse and huge crack. Terrified, 481 miles of snow, hardest thing I've ever done. I thought we were not going to finish. Frostbite, burn my lips, blisters, hypothermia. So try and write 3 answers like we've just done, based on these quotes. If you want to use a different quote, that's absolutely fine, but remember, this is just for the left hand column so far. Use any sheets or use any notes you've done to help you. Okay, so now I want you to highlight 5 words or phrases that make the expedition seem dangerous and difficult from the rest of the article. So we've done the left, now to the middle and the right column. See if you can get 5 from the rest of the article. So here's mine. So we go through the ones in the middle. So he says he's worried he might lose his nose. So that's a really explicit image, a horrible image of someone having their nose off. Then they will say the medical things will clear up in a couple of months. So that's dangerous because it shows it's not like a cold or something that's going to be okay in a month. A couple of months is a long time to recuperate. And quite like the ailments we had on the first column, we are told that the other members of the team also had things wrong, frostbite and pneumonia. So we're getting lots of facts there and factual information about the other people. Another reason it would be difficult, it was minus 50 at times, which sounds absolutely horrendous. Then we're told there's a vast hostile landscape. We're told not even a single bird would survive there or goes there. We're told that they skied for 16 hours a day, which is really extreme. We're told that they spend 9,000 calories a day, but they only consume 3,500. We're told that the food they're having now, that in England, where we are, we would think it was disgusting, the food they would have. We were told that Ben Fogle, the way he copes with it, if he just kept his mind on the skiing the whole time, he would go crazy, he would think. But he mentally goes somewhere else, so he's mentally got to switch off. So here's a little box that you can do like as a little activity. So we won't do this like now, but if you want to pause and have a go. So on the left there are quotes in the white, and all I want you to do in the blue is tell me what technique has been used and why is it dangerous, difficult. So for example, Ben Fogle thought he was going to die, a dramatic opening sentence. Why is it dangerous? Well, it shows that he might die. Giant crevasse, what giants underline, what is giant? Well, it's an adjective. Why has it been used? It emphasises danger. Huge crack, again, huge is an adjective. Why is it dangerous? Well, it shows that the ice could crack at any moment. And all the other ones, try to do a technique, try to do why is it dangerous. So pause the video now. So really big tip for you is write the answers and actually highlight the answers top to bottom. So when you're writing your answers, don't write one thing from the first paragraph, then the next thing from the fifth paragraph, then go back to the first paragraph. Try to do it in an order. One, because it's nice and easy for the examiner, but two, it's really simple to track your answers. And also you might see a little bit of a pattern form where maybe the character or the main person in the extract, their mood might change, or they might take a journey of some kind. So here's all the answers I've got. We've only talked about one so far. I've done 11. You would only need to do 5 or 6, but try to use those 7 or 8 quotes. The examiners love you to track the text and love you to do as many quotes as you can. So we're going to look at these in detail. So like I said, you needed 11. That looks like, I did 11. That looks like a huge amount. However, you could probably get away with doing even less than I've got on the screen now. So we're going to look at each one in detail, and then hopefully gives you a good idea of, I really want to get away from doing 7 or 8 lines PEs. We really want to do 2 sentences, move on, 2 sentences, move on. So the quote is, he thought he was going to die. Okay, the writer shows Fogle's expedition was full of danger with the dramatic opening sentence, he thought he was going to die. This shows it was very dangerous as they were risking their lives. So my red is my point and my technique, my black is my quote, and my blue is my explanation. So all I've said here, that the fact he says he was going to die, that makes it sound dangerous, as we know that Ben Fogle was risking his life. Quote 2, grueling. The journey is shown to be difficult with the adjective grueling. This suggests the trip was physically and mentally exhausting. So all I've done is zoomed in on the word grueling. What does it mean? Well, it means it's sort of exhausting. It's meant to be painful. Giant and huge. This is the one we've done before. The writer uses the powerful adjective giant to show how dangerous the expedition was. Giant suggests the crevasse was intimidating, enormous, and emphasises the danger Fogle experienced. We are also told the crack is huge. This adjective suggests it is so big that it may crack at any moment, which elevates the tension for the reader. Terrified, panic, and could die here. The reader also knows it is dangerous, as Fogle is not just anxious but terrified. The verb panic also shows Fogle has lost his composure and thinks he could die here. The writer also makes it sound difficult by using statistics, so that's my technique. We are told they pulled their sledges across 481 miles of ice in 18 days. So why does that sound difficult? Well, it just does, doesn't it? It sounds almost impossible, which seems an almost impossible feat. Another stat given is the temperature at -50, which makes the trip seem miserably cold and a huge test of endurance. The writer says Fogle thinks the trip is the hardest thing I've ever done. The superlative hardest suggests it couldn't have got any tougher than the conditions he encounters. Obviously, if it's the hardest thing he's ever done, then he's never going to experience anything more than that. The writer shows how dangerous it was by the various medical problems they suffered: frostbite, blisters, hypothermia, and pneumonia. The vast array of medical problems suggest the trip is extremely hazardous, and some of these could be deathly. Again, I've said my technique is they are showing all the medical problems. That's my quote, and I've just said, well, why is it dangerous? Why is it difficult? Well, all the problems suggest that really they're never going to get through it in a healthy way. The writer uses negative adjectives, that's my technique, vast and hostile, to describe the landscape. So now I'm going to zoom in on vast and hostile. These both suggest the emptiness and aggression of the South Pole, while suggesting they have no help if trouble comes. So if it's vast and hostile, they've got no help. The fact not even a single bird lives there suggests that any living thing will struggle to survive there, or at least want to live there. So it's such an awful experience that no living thing really wants to live there. The expedition sounds extremely challenging with the statistics the writer chooses to give the reader. Skiing for 16 hours a day makes the workload seem torturous both mentally and physically. The men are not eating enough to gain energy. Burnt 9,000 calories but consumed only 3,500. The verb burnt suggests the men are almost in pain through the physical energy they are using. The writer also makes it seem challenging by comparing the trip to life at home in the UK, as the food they are eating would be described as disgusting here. This shows how harsh the conditions were, because in the South Pole it became food from heaven. Last one. Finally, the writer makes it seem mentally challenging for Fogle, as we're told he goes somewhere else mentally. So why does somewhere else mentally mean it's difficult for us? Well, this suggests the expedition is so mentally draining he needs to switch off to complete it. So the writer has chosen to use the quote somewhere else mentally, and we've got to say why that. Why has he used it? Well, he's used it because it suggests it's so awful that they can't keep their mind on skiing all the time, that they've got to switch off and almost zone out. An effect on the reader: if you've got time, you could do a little conclusion. The writer makes it seem mentally and physical disintegrating expedition, where we admire the men for their determination and courage. So all the things, all the quotes we talked about, I've just summed up a little bit there. So there you go, there it all is. There's the 11 we've just gone through. Remember, you'd only have to do 6 or 7 if you've got time, 5 if you're really struggling. But even in this 7, I haven't just got 7 quotes, I've probably got about 12 or 13 quotes in this 7. Okay, there it all is. If you want to look at it, go through Moodle. There's a grade 9 answer there for you to download. Here's a grade 3 or 4 example. Remember, we're looking at grade 9, but this is a grade 3 or 4 example that we want to do better on. So first of all, there's not enough. It's a 15-minute question, we need lots. Secondly, there's not enough quotes. There's probably 3 quotes. We're looking for 7 or 8. And also, the examiner's put, there's some detail, but there's no analysis. So they've not said why the writer has used the words. They've not said how, what effect they've got. And also, limited coverage means they've not gone through the whole text. They've only picked out 3 quotes. The examiner wants to do 7 or 8 quotes all the way through the extract. This one seems to be just from the first column. So banned explanation. So when we're doing our explanation, if you're saying giant, we're saying this suggests it's enormous. That is zooming on the word and saying why they picked that word giant. What we don't want to do is have things like this. Don't use the following explanations. It makes the reader want to read on. It puts an image in the reader's mind. It makes it interesting for the reader. We always get these in these exams. These are going to get you no marks. These are vague, and these basically could be about any text. So you're picking out a word and you're just saying why that word has been chosen. So giant has been chosen to suggest that the crack is enormous. Hostile has been chosen to show the aggression of the landscape. No other bird has been chosen to show that no other living animal wants to be there. They've been chosen for a reason. Be specific. Don't just say it makes the reader want to move on. So summary for the question: focus on what happens and how the language is used. Focus on what the writer is doing. Try to use sentence starters that the writer uses. Try to use correct subject terminology. You don't have to use it all the time, but use it at least 4 or 5 times. Explain the effect on the reader, and try to use as many quotes as you can. 6, 7, 8 quotes if you can. That's it for this video on the how question.